Laughter rolled across the candlelit room like a tide, washing over Claire Donovan as she stood in a faded apron, clutching a dusty violin that wasn't hers. Somewhere behind the polished cutlery and crystal stems, a camera phone tilted up, hungry for spectacle. Wealth swirled like perfume, indifference felt heavier than brass. The corner table held the night's center of gravity, a billionaire whose attention moved markets, not people. Claire felt the room take its collective breath, not in wonder, but expectation of an easy joke. She tasted metal, the flavor of shame rising from an empty stomach, the sort of hunger that bends a person's spine. When the first squeak tore from the string, the sound wasn't music. It was the opening bell of a fight she had already been told she would lose. The room reconfigured itself into an arena disguised as a restaurant. Chairs angled, eyes narrowed, shoulders leaned back as if wealth granted front-row rights to humiliation. The lighting, once warm, turned interrogational, pinning Claire in a cone of brightness, while the surrounding darkness filled with spectators. Forks tapped in syncopated derision, a crude metronome encouraging her to fail on tempo. Champagne bubbled like applause aimed at the wrong performance. The polished floor reflected her shoes and the scuffed apron, proof that poverty refuses to stay hidden even when pressed and neat. Across the space, a smirk sharpened into an emblem of permission. The room wanted a small tragedy served between courses. Claire's breathing shortened. Her wrists remembered recitals, but her stomach remembered rent. This wasn't a stage. It was a scaffold dressed in linen. The bow met the string and produced a thin, panicked sound, like a trapped bird flapping in a vent. Laughter arrived on cue, generous and confident, because ridicule feels cheap when paid with someone else's dignity. Glass stems clinked, a napkin fell in exaggerated disappointment. A phone flash punctured the air like a paparazzo's grin. Shame found her pulse and marched to it. She felt calluses that once held entire concertos flare uselessly, fingers scrambling, minds splitting between technique and survival. The second note died faster than the first. Her ears burned. The room's heat turned personal, a targeted climate. Time stretched into a corridor of locked doors. For one choking beat, she believed the story written for her. Poor girl proves why she's poor, then returns to clearing plates. The bow trembled. The room demanded more failure. Humiliation settled like dust on a velvet chair. Soft, visible, impossible to ignore. Claire sensed the hierarchy breathing. Servers orbiting tables, credit cards like scepters, entitlement posing as taste. The billionaire's posture became the room's temperature. He didn't need to speak. The smirk did the talking. It said art is a novelty when purchased, a nuisance when requested by the hungry. Claire felt the calculation of 1,000 small losses, overdue notices, unpaid interest, the last voicemail from a landlord who had perfected sympathy's accent. The bow lay in her hand like an accusation. Around her, the dining room practiced a ritual older than stained glass, public diminishment for private reassurance. Every second extended the sentence. Her throat tightened. Somewhere, the memory of a stage light flickered. But here, under pendants of curated warmth, she was the evening's harmless cruelty.
The room blurred. Funeral lilies replaced rosemary. A winter curb replaced the tiled floor. 3 years compressed into one shattering image. 2 coffins, one choice, music or meals. Claire remembered the feel of the conservatory's door as it closed behind her, the click that sounded like destiny edited with a cheap razor. Debt had a smell, paper and panic, and it moved in like a roommate. She pawned applause for groceries, traded calluses for cracked knuckles, exchanged ovations for tips sliced thin by taxes and indifference. The bow, once a wand, had become a relic. Now the vision reversed, faces reappeared, candles steadied. The billionaire's watch blinked like a lighthouse for the lost. But grief didn't ask permission. It handed her something fierce, something sharp, something clean. Memory detached the rope from her neck and tied it to the music. Claire tightened the bow hair with a mechanic's certainty, as if preparing a tool rather than a toy. Air thinned to the thickness of a backstage curtain. Her shoulders aligned, not proud, but precise. The violin angled into her jaw with the familiarity of an oath. In the reflection of a wine bottle, she saw posture return like a recalled soldier. The room didn't change. She did. Humiliation didn't vanish. It hardened into focus. Every breath became a measure. Somewhere deep, the map of scales lit up, an old city found under new dirt. She felt the weight of what must be answered, not to them, but to herself. The bow hovered an instant longer, a blade considering where to cut. When it descended, it aimed for the artery of the night, the presumption that money decides what matters.
The first true note landed with gravity, not volume. It didn't apologize for the squeak before it, it swallowed it. Glasses paused mid-air, a chorus of tiny halts. The room's soundscape shifted from laughter to listening, a pivot so quick it bruised pride on the way down. Claire measured the distance between noise and attention and found it smaller than a breath. The ceiling lights softened, or perhaps eyes did. In the kitchen pass, a chef's hand froze above a plate, sauce ribbon hanging like a held sentence. Claire felt control reassemble inside her like a thaw. The note extended, shaped, curved around the edges of derision, and returned changed. Shame, denied oxygen, began to recede. The arena became an amphitheater, the mockery a memorial to its own poor taste. The night discovered a center that wasn't wealth. Her spine drew a clean line through the room, shoulders leveled, chin lifted, breath anchored. Old teachers' corrections fluttered back like well-trained birds. Wait here, release there, let the phrase land, and then leave it. Vibrato warmed under her fingertips, small fire spreading without smoke. Claire no longer occupied the restaurant, it occupied her resonance. The apron faded from meaning, the bow hand made its old promises and kept them. Melodies braided grief and muscle memory until the two were indistinguishable. She chose phrasing that didn't flatter the room, phrasing that indicted it. Somewhere in the back, a phone lowered in slow defeat. She tasted salt, but not from tears. It was the mineral of effort returning to blood. The instrument answered like a witness finally sworn in. A life interrupted resumed its sentence mid-word and spoke with authority.
Across the room, the night's monarch felt his crown tilt. Confidence that had always arrived on command stumbled at the threshold. His smirk weakened under the weight of craftsmanship not available for purchase. The metrics that governed his world, growth, margins, leverage, could not price the tremor at his sternum. Claire's tone found a seam in the armor he had lacquered with years of victory. It pried, not violently, but relentlessly, like water under a door. He realized the laughter had stopped, and that its absence made him visible in a way his wealth never had. The dining room's gaze drifted off him and onto the force reshaping the air. A sentence he'd never feared stood up inside him. You were wrong. He sat back, not to relax, but to endure. Humiliation, unbudgeted, entered his ledger with permanent ink. Walls did not move, yet the room shifted from commerce to reckoning. Tablecloths felt like legal pads. The bar became a gallery of witnesses. Claire's bow set the docket, admitting into evidence every narrowed eye, every tossed napkin, every casual cruelty masquerading as culture. The billionaire occupied the defendant's chair without invitation. No gavel sounded, the silence was sufficient authority. Phrases cascaded like cross-examination, each answer truer than the last. The prosecution required no words, intent was audible. Claire's face did not demand pity, only attention paid in full. The verdict approached with the calm of inevitability. When a high note held long enough to measure a heartbeat, the jury looked up from its menus and recognized themselves. The room, once sure of its own taste, learned the difference between luxury and worth. Judgment landed without spectacle.
Shame practiced subtle choreography. Eyes drifted toward bread baskets.
Napkins unfolded with needless care, wrists busied themselves with imaginary lint. Those who had smiled widest at the opening squeak now studied flatware patterns as if the etching held scripture. The room's body language surrendered, one posture at a time. Claire did not chase their contrition. She poured tone over it like salt over ice and let time do the melting. A server paused at the kitchen door, tray held high, gaze soft with something like prayer. Wealth felt heavy on wrists and light in argument. The night's rhythm slowed from ridicule to reverence without announcing the gear change. In that hush, people recognized how quickly cruelty becomes habit, how easily dignity is spent for entertainment. Claire kept playing, not to punish, but to finish the sentence humiliation had started. She shaped the closing line with surgeon's patience, carving space for it to ring. The final note did not slam, it settled, a snowfall that revealed footprints everyone wanted to deny. Cutlery resumed only after the sound had fully died, as if the room feared injuring its echo. Claire lowered the instrument with ritual care, not triumph. The silence that followed felt earned, like a debt at last acknowledged. The billionaire's reflection in the window looked smaller than the man who had arrived. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim, humbled by resonance. Somewhere, a glass exhaled a tiny ping. It sounded like an admission. The night's narrative, once greedy for spectacle, now stood corrected. Money remained money, power remained power, but neither could overrule what the bow had written in the air. Poor is not worthless, and laughter is not law.
Breath returned to her like someone opening a window. The tremor in her hands wasn't fear anymore. It was the aftershock of a building refusing to collapse. Tears rose unsummoned and did their quiet work of cleaning surfaces words can't reach. Claire felt every hour of practice she hadn't played, every lesson shelved, every program brochure recycled for rent. In the wake of sound, the body demands payment. She gave it oxygen and stillness. Around her, plates cooled unchecked. Phones that usually captured everything chose, at last, to look away. This wasn't victory confetti, it was debris clearing after an explosion that rebuilt instead of destroyed. She set the violin down the way you set a name back on your own mouth. The room's heartbeats synced to hers. For once, attention didn't feel like a spotlight. It felt like respect. From the kitchen corridor, Anthony DeLuca advanced with the reverence of a pallbearer carrying joy. The case he placed beside Claire had edges softened by decades and corners kissed by 1,000 careful hands. The wood smelled faintly of lemon oil in winter rooms. His eyes held the weight of old stories, a grandmother who played through power outages, a voyage where music paid for bread, a life measured not by titles but by tones remembered. He saw in Claire the exact posture he had watched in sepia photographs. The room, which knew the price of everything, learned cost from the way he touched the latch. When the case opened, felt lining glowed like a quiet altar. Legacy doesn't ask for attention, it asks for stewardship. He offered not charity, but lineage, and the night understood the distinction.
Humiliation prefers silence when it works best. It found Nathaniel Pierce seated at a perfect table in a perfect suit, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands. Dominance, so reflexive a minute ago, misplaced itself somewhere between the first honest note and the last suspended breath. He searched the room for an exit that didn't look like retreat and found only mirrors. In them, his confidence had bad posture. The metrics he trusted, net worth, acquisition count, invitation lists, made no sound in the register that mattered tonight. He had always believed rooms belonged to those who could pay for them. Now the room felt rented from grace, and his lease had expired. A flush crept up from his collar, the color of unspent apologies. He realized humiliation doesn't subtract wealth, it subtracts certainty. For the first time, he was poor in measure. Memory offered him a highlight reel curated for denial.
glass towers polished to weatherlessness, engines purring in garages that smelled like triumph, private dining rooms designed to echo only laughter he approved. He watched that film and found it overexposed. The victories felt like receipts rather than accomplishments, line items paid by years he hadn't lived. The camera panned to the present, to a woman with a cheap apron and an instrument older than his portfolio, and the contrast shattered composition. He had purchased art, he had never faced it. Beneath the polished shell, he found a vacancy with his name on the lease. It wasn't guilt that undid him, it was recognition. The empire wasn't false, but it was unfinished in a way wealth cannot correct. Music had opened a wall safe and shown him nothing inside except echo.
The instinct to transact tried to stand up inside him, then sat down, embarrassed. Gesture replaced strategy. The space between grandeur and goodness is measured in small, unmarketable movements. He breathed once, the way people do before jumping into cold water, and chose decency without theatrics. Around them, the room attempted to normalize itself. Servers resumed routes, conversations restarted with rearranged topics, but the air held the imprint of what had happened. He understood future rooms would forget. People always do. He also understood he must not. Opulence can disguise intention. Tonight required it bare-faced. He prepared to extend something that could not be photographed into a headline. The simple act of stepping out of the way so someone else's path could widen. No angle could make it glamorous. That was the point. Some repairs happen where cameras cannot follow. Claire's chest still rose with the rhythm of earned fatigue. Opportunity had a scent, too. It smelled like exposure wrapped in kindness, a combination she had learned to distrust. The night offered a ladder tilted by a hand that had pushed earlier. Pride, not arrogance, but survival, asked her to measure the distance between dignity and convenience. She remembered paperwork signed with trembling hands, promises that cost interest, calendar invites that became cancellations. Hope had teeth when misused. She had scars shaped like bite marks. She weighed hunger against history and found the scale uneven. What she needed wasn't rescue staged for applause. What she needed was room to stand without being reduced to a miracle. The decision forming inside her wasn't theatrical. It was precise. Accept nothing that requires erasing the truth of what just happened. Vibrations hummed against linen. A phone lit a small square of tablecloth like a lighthouse for ships without maps. News traveled through fiber and faith faster than rooms can change their minds. Somewhere across the city, a director with a memory for rare timbers listened to a shaky recording that somehow captured clarity. The line between institutions and individuals narrowed to a voice recognizing a missing instrument in its orchestra. Opportunity arrived without velvet rope, not because wealth summoned it, but because excellence did. The room, which had constructed its own theater, now felt like a vestibule to the real one. Surprise swept the diners with the softness of cotton and the sting of lemon. Applause muffled itself, aware of its recent sins. Claire's future adjusted its posture. Not a rescue, a recognition. The difference mattered more than anything. Gossip learned humility mid-sentence. Conversations rerouted like traffic after a storm, avoiding the debris of earlier laughter. Some faces brightened too quickly, auditioning for retroactive kindness. Others dimmed, aware they had been loud in the wrong direction. Servers carried plates with priestly care, as if sound could bruise the moment. The billionaire's table lost its gravitational pull, attention redistributed toward the woman who had altered the room's math. No toast could fix what contempt had spilled, but the clink of glass softened into apology's dialect. In that redesigned soundscape, the restaurant remembered it was built for celebration, not spectacle. Claire stood at the exact intersection of hunger and grace, holding an instrument that now felt like a passport. The night, which had started as a trap, revealed a door. Its hinges didn't squeak. They sang a single, patient note.
Choice rarely appears with labels. It arrives as weight. The violin case pressed gently against Claire's forearm, a reminder that stewardship is heavier than survival. She envisioned 2 mornings, One where she returned to this room with trays and practiced smiles. Another where she woke to the ache of scales and the terror of auditions. Both contained fear. Only one contained meaning. The past argued for safety. The present argued for truth. The future stayed quiet, as it often does when watching courage prepare itself. She examined the faces that had fed on her humiliation and felt nothing left to give them. She examined the man who had underestimated her and found a mirror warning against doing the same to herself. The instrument waited. Dreams do not disappear, they go dormant. Waking one carries the responsibility of staying awake. Across the table, power practiced the art of subtraction. Nathaniel Pierce allowed certainty to step aside without ceremony. He aligned his breathing to the tempo set by someone else, a discipline new to him. Wealth can compel, but cannot compel respect. He understood that equation now. He did not curate his posture. He let it sag into honesty. Rooms have memories shorter than reputations. He chose to begin rewriting his in the smallest script possible. No chandelier swung to acknowledge it. No headline would later record it. He made space around Claire that had previously been filled with his name. Influence, when cleansed of ego, looks a lot like silence. He learned to hold it without needing credit. The room didn't applaud. The night didn't tilt. But a fault line inside him shifted away from conquest toward care.
Anthony DeLuca lowered himself into the chair beside Claire with the gravity of a witness taking an oath. He had watched rooms like this for decades, had seen fortunes announce themselves with volume and leave without warning. He trusted other instruments, the metronome in the chest, the register of sincerity concealed in small choices, the residual hum of truth after applause ends. He placed a hand on the violin case, not to claim it, but to bless its next miles. He remembered faces transformed by music in basements and borrowed halls, remembered a grandmother whose hands never shook on a down bow even when the rent did. He had no speech written on napkins, no grand gesture staged for gratitude. His offering was the simplest and most costly, permission for legacy to travel forward under another name. Rooms rarely notice such moments. Futures do. The axis of the evening spun, not like a carousel, but like a compass needle finding north after interference. Claire felt the current of attention change direction and land with gentleness. The din of advice quieted before it began. Her back straightened, not in defiance but in ownership. Around her, wealth behaved itself, discovering the elegance of restraint. People accustomed to being seen for their status experienced the odd relief of invisibility. The billionaire learned the precise amount of space that respect takes up, less than ego, more than apology. The air cooled, the lighting warmed. Even the floor seemed steadier under shoes that had spent years standing for others' comfort. Humiliation, which had walked in like a guest of honor, gathered its coat and left without goodbyes. What remained wasn't triumph, it was alignment. Rooms feel different when truth sits down.
Claire inhaled with the fullness of someone about to sign her name to a page that matters. The exhale carried a verdict older than contracts. She would play again, not to erase poverty, not to purchase acceptance, but to honor the promise she had made to a younger self in a practice room that smelled like rosin and courage. The case clicked shut with the intimacy of a vow. A tremor crossed her mouth and steadied into a line. Around her, relief disguised itself as applause withheld out of respect. No confetti, no spotlight chasing, just a choice heavy enough to anchor a life. The night's arc, which had flirted with spectacle, settled into story. Somewhere beyond these walls, a stage prepared lighting for a rehearsal it didn't yet know it would host. The future turned its face toward her and listened. When Claire raised the violin again, the action felt different, as if the instrument had been returned with interest. The first phrase bloomed did not fight the room, it rearranged it. She shaped dynamics like weather patterns,
pressure rising and falling with her wrist, releasing a coastline of sound that made space for breathing. This was not a demand for forgiveness, nor a victory lap staged for cameras. It was a recalibration. The same people, the same tables, the same pendants, yet the acoustics honored choice instead of coercion. A server leaned into the doorway just enough to hear the cadence resolve. The kitchen flame hissed in counterpoint. Claire's tone found corners dust never leaves and swept them clean. She played not as evidence or protest, but as presence. The performance ended without flourish, leaving the room startled at its own gentleness. Applause began in a place unaccustomed to being first, the seat of a man learning to be small. It wasn't loud, it was accurate. The sound spread with careful hands, not to drown the moment, but to hold it steady. Some faces flushed, others softened, a few managed both. In that rhythm, the room practiced restoration without spectacle. The earlier laughter had spent itself and left no currency behind. Now, each palm meeting another registered as an individual act of consent to a better version of the night. Claire received none of it as penance. She let it pass through and around, choosing to keep only the quiet that followed. Repair doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It registers as a lessening of weight, a return of balance, a shared agreement that harm happened and won't be repeated here. Anthony presented the bow with the ceremony of a passport stamped by generations. The wood carried tiny nicks that maps could not catalog, and oils that only devotion leaves. In his eyes, she saw a doorway open between the past that survived and the future that deserved. She accepted without dramatics, understanding that spectacle bruises gifts. The bow settled into her grip as if the hand had been shaped around it by someone she'd never met. Legacy doesn't erase hunger or debt, but it feeds something those cannot touch. A table nearby exhaled, unaware it had been holding breath for too long. The room, which had flirted with cruelty, discovered reverence looks better on it. Anthony's smile found the exact size of pride that doesn't steal focus. The exchange concluded like a chord resolving, inevitable, right, complete.
Night air met them, with the clean honesty interiors rarely manage. The city stacked its windows into constellations of labor and loneliness. Claire stepped onto the sidewalk with a case that felt less like luggage and more like spine. The door closed behind with the softness of a page turned, not a story ended. Footsteps fell in beside hers, unhurried, unclaiming, a presence practicing witness instead of direction. Traffic hummed a low ostinato. Somewhere, sirens rehearsed for lives on different ledgers. She tasted the promise of cold and the electricity of change. No paparazzi, no staged embraces, just shoes on concrete and breath that finally kept time with hope. The building's reflection in a puddle shivered and reassembled as they passed. It looked smaller than before, which is to say, it looked the right size. 6 months later, a different hall inhaled and held itself still for the first bow. The stage smelled like lacquered wood and relieved terror. Claire stood inside light chosen by professionals who understood what to illuminate and what to leave respectfully dark. Programs rustled to a stop. Somewhere in the front row, a man who used to confuse expense with value learned how to sit without casting a shadow. Claire lifted the instrument and began. The sound was not a miracle. It was the arithmetic of work multiplied by refusal to disappear. Each phrase honored hands now gone, rooms survived, nights rethreaded from humiliation into resolve. When the final cadence settled, the hall stayed quiet an extra heartbeat, long enough to name precisely what had changed. Not her worth, not their taste, only their understanding of both.